Hey guys, exciting news! You're listening to an episode from our brand new segment, Park Enthusiasts. Join in as I interview folks across the outdoor industry, from podcast hosts, outdoor brand founders, influencers, and more. I'm excited to unlock conversations with people whose love for the outdoors and national parks heavily influence their careers and life paths. Let's jump in. Welcome to Who Runs This Park, Park Enthusiast segment, where we expand our universe and knowledge of experiences in the outdoors and at national parks through conversations with highly regarded and respected individuals in the outdoor world. As always, Who Runs This Park aims to be a catalyst for inspiration, exploration, and appreciation of our world's natural beauty. Today we have Keith Eshelman with us, Parks Project co-founder and CEO. Parks Project is a brand that urges everyone to leave the parks better than you found it. Through selling national park products and accessories, Parks Project gives back 25% of its profits to our national parks and parklands. Keith, after working for over a decade in the lifestyle brand space, namely Quicksilver and Tom's, was inspired by a trip to Big Sur, where he saw firsthand how his favorite trail was overrun and at risk of never reopening, and quickly learned that this was unfortunately a common thing happening across the U.S. Him and his coworker at Tom's were inspired to start organizing volunteer days in the Santa Monica Mountains, and they quickly rallied to come around a business model that could generate profit that then funded this extensive backlog of projects in the Park Service. Today, Parks Project has given over $2.6 million back to our parks. I feel especially excited to be talking with Keith, as he mainly partners with friends groups at national parks. And if you've checked out any of the interviews with the national park superintendents as a part of Who Runs This Park, you'd be very familiar with the crucial role that these friend groups play at each park. I'm beyond excited to hear more of Keith's story and his heart for giving back to our parks, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Keith, welcome to Who Runs This Park.
Hey, thanks for the intro. And yeah, maybe this is a little segment on who runs this project, because I know we're talking about a little sidebar here, because parks have a lot of projects. So I've learned over the years, and we can dive into that a little bit today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a fun way, and just to get us in the outdoor mindset, a fun way I like to kick off these conversations is by just sharing crazy experiences you've had in the outdoors. So do you have a crazy or extremely memorable experience you've had outdoors?
Many. Yes, this is a really hard question to answer. And the first thing that I optimistically was thinking was, maybe it hasn't happened yet. I'd like to think so. I've started to spend so many time in so many different parks, and I'm trying not to rush through them and leave things for the future, because, when you jam through a place and try to hit a checklist, you kind of miss the whole experience. But this last spring, I did a climbing trip in the Black Canyon in the Gunnison. And
Mm-hmm.
as of, history to date, that was probably the craziest experience I've had in a park. Just the whole
Oh, nice.
descending into the 2,000 feet into a canyon, the sheer beauty of being down there with no one around, and it's like half the width of Zion. It's really an intimate setting where you can really see the walls, and then, adding a layer of climbing just made it a pretty crazy experience for me. But I think, yeah, every park has sort of like a peak epic adventure. And that's kind of my approach, is going to places to do whatever awesome kind of activity can correlate to that geology, or that,
Mm-hmm.
hydrology, or whatever that park kind of represents.
Yeah, I really like what you said of
Hmm.
not rushing through a park, and it's very top of mind for me because I just yesterday, and this won't be applicable when I actually release this episode, but I released yesterday the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park interview with that superintendent. And when I was in college, I got to do an 8-day backpacking trip in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, and that's the longest to date that I've ever spent in the backcountry. And we were on foot, so we didn't see that much of the park, but that experience was so rich and so intimate and so rugged and so wild that it will forever stick with me. And it's like, it's one of my favorite parks because of that experience. And so I like kind of your approach of going to these places and trying to appreciate each one for what it is when, like you said, you've been to so many.
Yeah, it's, have a moment And that moment's probably what you're going to remember
Hmm.
versus driving around rapidly trying to check everything off in a half day or three
Right.
quarters of a day. And I like to think I can come back another time to access another part of that park. So we're all so busy, we rush around so much, phones are so consuming and always on, and you're trying to capture pictures. And I've looked back at some national park experiences and like, was I really present to soak it all in? And I think your example of
Mm,
backpacking is fantastic because everything slows down. You probably have no service, and you don't need
hmm.
to take pictures of everything because you're on a journey.
Yeah, you're making me think of my grandma used to tell me this of travel to a place like you will come back. And I think that has stuck with me because it changes your perspective and helps you. It's still hard to be present, but I think it helps you being present rather than like and appreciating each experience for what it is rather than trying to check off the top 10 things in Yellowstone or whatnot. So I like kind of doing that. We're going to jump around a little bit. Where kind of my mind is going right now is so Parks Project, as I mentioned in the intro, does started with volunteer work. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about that journey. And then I'd love to learn more about the type of events you currently do, ones you've been on, stuff like that. But I want listeners to understand kind of a little bit of the history of like what volunteering through Parks Project has looked like. And then we can go into some of the experiences you've had running some of those events and stuff like that.
Yeah, hey, I think giving back to the land and healing things in general is just so cool. So I, had a variety of experiences in far off places and also right in my own backyard in city parks, etc. But um, just to do something to contribute to conservation, to
Mhm.
leaving a place better, which is our tagline, it feels really good. And oftentimes you meet great people in doing so. And my introduction to all this did come around the arrival of my firstborn, where I saw a problem in a park and wanted to volunteer to try to make a difference because I was thinking generationally. All of a sudden, I had my next generation with me, and I was thinking, how am I going to leave parks for the next generation?
Right.
Later to discover, oh my gosh, there are so many projects in so many parks, right? So how can we be part of that solution?
Yeah.
And every park has a unique problem they may be trying to solve. If it's over visitation, hey, we may love our parks to death. Many of the projects I find myself involved in are just because of us humans really leaving an imprint on the places that we visit. And, hey, we want to encourage people to leave a lighter footprint, and hopefully maybe they can even just leave it a little bit better. But the volunteer work has inspired, obviously, the company, and how the mission is to really use the proceeds, use the energy of this business to leave a place better and fund a
Right.
project, volunteer in a project. And sometimes I do say that's one of the hardest parts of my job is organizing volunteer days because everybody aspirationally wants to do such, but
Mhm.
sometimes life just doesn't permit. And then you find when we do volunteer events in easier to access places, that's when people can show up for a couple hours and do some service work on a weekend or something like that in one of their favorite places. But our volunteer efforts have really started as a personal passion, and I think it brought
Right.
more people in. And then slowly, the volunteer group turned into, hey, there's a bigger idea here in having some experience in fashion, apparel, etc. But it's still a driver, to this day. I'll be in the Catskills this weekend working on a project outside of,
Oh, cool.
upstate New York. And, every month, I'm always trying to personally make sure that I'm involved in some sort of project in a park that I visited or will be visiting as sort of my symbiotic relationship to the outdoors and parks. So trying to really live the mission that we've set forth with Parks Project.
Yeah, and is this event in the Catskills, is it through Parks Project, an event, or is it some okay, it is.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, we have to collaborate with a Friends of group,
Yeah.
and there's a nonprofit partner to every park. So if you do have a favorite park, maybe dig a little deeper and find out who that is, because they're probably doing some work behind the scenes to make your visitor experience a little bit better. But yeah, we're going to highlight Catskill's story, and in doing so, give a little back to a habitat restoration park park
Oh,
project up there.
cool. You kind of mentioned this a little bit. So it's like the volunteering spurred the idea of like, okay, how can we create a business model that enables us to give back money to the parks? Was it your experience at Tom's that led you to sell like apparel, or how did you decide what that you would actually sell apparel and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what drove me to Tom's was trying to do a few initiatives at Quicksilver prior, to be honest. I saw some opportunities to create product stories with purpose.
Mhm.
So this is earlier in my career, but I'm seeing how back then I was trying to pitch this is basically a project, which ended up being taken on by another brand years later, but removing plastic from the Pacific Gyre
Okay.
and turning those microplastics into fabric, and then selling board shorts. I mean, like, hey, these board shorts
Oh,
are
cool.
part of the solution instead of part of the
Right.
problem, right? And we did a few other things, and tested it, and some of it didn't fit into the brand premise, and how they were going to market or working with athletes, etc. So I mean, those early like product stories with a purpose definitely led me to saying, okay, I want to be with a company and serving a bigger purpose. In that point in time, is Tom's was doing it the best,
Right.
and I was able to land a job there and helping expand that business internationally, and telling that story of one for one, which was very simple at the time, was very novel and really disrupted the footwear industry.
Yeah. So how did you I guess you had these experiences in the apparel world. What was it like or how did you even design your first products as Parks Project?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make a dynamic model
Right.
where hopefully you show up and you solve a problem, and you can't be stuck with it forever, because hey, if your business scales and you're giving away millions of shoes, you want to make sure that it's serving a purpose and
Right.
solving a problem. And that was the cool thing about projects for me. It's like, oh wow, there are so many, and there's
Yes, so many.
billion-dollar backlog. So how can we scale a business that can scale an impact? And that came back to, it's like, wow, let's tell the story of these beautiful places. Let's really elaborate on the brand and what it represents, and highlight the adventures you can have in these places, and then follow it up with some projects and funding and work in that park. So I think that some of the early parks and projects that we were doing were here in California.
Mhm.
I grew up in the Bay Area and now live in Los Angeles, but we were working with Muir Woods
Oh,
on the
cool.
nursery project. We were working with Joshua Tree and a handful of other California parks, Point Reyes, et cetera. And yeah, through those volunteer days, I had discoveries about the projects. I was like, okay, I think, we can make some cool products that tell the story.
And it may have changed over time, but at the beginning, would you have a certain product that was the funds from that specific t-shirt were funding a specific project?
Yeah, and we even tried to put the project into the graphic, which we still do to some extent.
Right.
And I'll just use Muir Woods because I mentioned that, but we featured the redwoods on there, and the project was the nursery.
Cool.
It's like, wait, why is the nursery there, and how can we turn that into a little educational
Yeah.
moment? It's like there's a lot of invasive species that are taking up real estate. Some of the redwoods aren't propagating the way they should. So a lot of the projects I find myself doing are equal invasive species removal
Mhm.
and planting natives, right? And there's so many projects across so many different parts of a park and what they're dealing with. But the habitat restoration really has resonated with me,
Yeah.
because we've had an impact and we can reverse it.
Mhm.
Hopefully that's an inspirational story to everyone to get involved and be optimistic about where we're going as humanity. I mean, we can hopefully reverse some of the trends that we're facing, and be hands on around some of those solutions. But yeah, that was like a habitat restoration story
Okay.
tied into a graphic on a T-shirt. So
The to just boost that
let's
kind
boost
of
it.
how habitat restoration has resonated with you, pretty much every superintendent talks about habitat restoration as something they're focusing on, and it seems to take a a ton of resources, a ton of time. It's like top of the bill, especially as I've talked to like some of the Hawaii national parks. They are experiencing it significantly of habitat loss. But yeah, the effort, the like lengths at which parks are going to remove invasive species and to promote native species from regrowing is super extensive and requires a lot of support. So it's cool that you guys are putting a lot of your projects towards that larger effort.
Yeah, everything's connected,
Yeah.
right? So if we can just kind of like restore habitats, then in essence, we can kind of restore ourselves too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. So I guess how has that shifted as you've grown as a company? So at the beginning, like you said, it was very project specific. How does that work now? Is it you have revenue, you have profit that then you figure out how to allocate after the fact? Or what is that pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started looking at an impact model as a whole
Right.
and how we can leave it better. Being quite, a pretty small company, we're under 20 employees, is in working with these park partners, the nonprofit conservancies or friends groups. We have probably a bigger voice than Wallet,
Yeah.
and is it all about contributing money to projects? And that really hit an inflection point years ago when we said, okay, let's revisit how we're supporting projects and really trying to figure out a model that includes financial contribution, that includes volunteer work,
Hmm.
and trying to really activate people around getting involved in a park project. And that's when we came up with our cleanup kits too and said, hey, a lot of people wanted to join Parks Project. We can't do events everywhere for everyone,
Right.
but hey, we're going to send you some cleanup kits. Go to your local park and leave it
Oh,
better.
cool.
So the project funding, the volunteer work, and also just the education and advocacy is where I think we saw the most opportunity. In talking with a lot of park groups, they saw Parks Project as a great vehicle for that.
Hmm.
It's like, how do we work with you all to let people know that A, there is a nonprofit partner to this park, and B, they need support to do the plethora of projects they have going on. So I think it's a little bit more wholesome of a story now that ties back closer to the mission. And
Right.
that's what we're trying to do is really have everything aligned around parks and projects and
Yeah.
leaving it better. And how do we do that
Yeah.
is through a variety of ways. It's not just, a story of us making money and giving money, right?
Yeah.
We're here for a reason, and there's an authentic through line there.
Yeah. I mean, in a similar, I'm not selling products at the moment, but
Mhm.
I interview superintendents and then I interview folks in the outdoor world. And part of it is to build a community and further educate people and help them become park enthusiasts. And kind of along a similar vein, through hearing the stories of the superintendents, my hope is that that will spark a curiosity in people. And then maybe they will be like, oh, I do love Yellowstone. Let me look up their friends group. Or, oh, like I live close to Acadia. How can I be a better steward of when I go? Stuff like that. And just pulling back the curtain a little bit of these places are amazing places that we get to visit, but they're not maintained by like magic. It takes a ton of resources, a ton of knowledge to protect them, to preserve them, and to restore them to how they were before we impacted them pretty drastically. So yeah, I like what you're saying of it is more like the brand that you have created is more than this make money to give money model. And it has a lot of facets. So
Mhm.
I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and in advance, just try to recreate responsibly, right?
Yeah.
And we try to tell that story is, get out there and get your leave no trace on when you're out
Yeah.
there.
The more of a question about I love the graphic designs you all have. You said you had a pretty small team. So I mean, you guys, if people, I recommend looking at your website. You have a ton of awesome products and ton of awesome collaborations. How do you manage all the different product designs? Is it people submit stuff in or you have people on your team that are designing all of those different specifications?
Yeah, we'll create a story in some design direction, and we work with an artist collective of people who
Oh, cool.
have different styles, and it. I think there's something about not having just a copy paste graphic strategy or like it's this style across any park you want, right? So it's
Hmm.
fun for us to move around, and we can also tell a project story that way and say, hey, we're going to be talking
Yeah.
about the Catskills. We have a story that ties back to that landscape, and let's get some designs that highlight the that local landscape, really. So yeah, it's coming up with the design direction, the product story, and hopefully a bit of the project, and then working with various just graphic, usually experts and really creative people
Yeah.
who really want, they also want to make a contribution to parks. And they feel like they get to do that through working with us too. Then we kind of
Yeah.
package all
That's
that
really
up
cool.
into a seasonal story, and hopefully it's cohesive and ties back to our mission.
Yeah. I think something I found in researching and in talking to you of just this pulse and thread of how story driven your company is really cool. And I mean, like you said, that you're always trying to make sure that everything you do aligns with the core mission of helping to leave the parks better than you found them. And obviously, I'm a national park fan because of all these things I'm doing. So I just love that. Like, I just, just objectively, I think it's really awesome. So yeah, just kudos to you for that. It's very
Yeah,
cool.
I think, I mean, you use the word enthusiast. I think that's what I have on my Instagram, like who I am. I'm a park enthusiast, and I think if you're excited about something, you also care about it, right? If you love going to these
Yeah.
places, you also like, oh, let's try to protect and preserve these places too. So how everybody does that can also be different, right? We all have
Hmm.
different lifestyles, different financial situations, different uses of parks, right? For some people,
Right.
if it, I mentioned climbing, is it access trails, or if it's just spending time in the valley, is it minimizing your footprint, staying on trails, and picking up a little trash while you're there. So some people who have corner offices and high rises may just want to cut checks. That's the way they can get back to parks most effectively. So I think
Yeah.
that's also been a cool discovery of mine, and not trying to preach one way for you to turn your enthusiasm into caretaking of a place, because everybody's going to want to do it differently.
I think broadening the scope of understanding the ways that people can give back and that it's bigger than
Mm.
maybe what you came in knowing is really cool. You had mentioned, you know, helping people recreate sustainably and stuff like that. And I saw somewhere that Parks Project did I believe it was a workshop with Patagonia on sustainability. Can you share a little bit more about that and how you as a like apparel company are thinking about sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, it's work that's never going to be done. I think that's the hardest
True.
part of it, is that it's an endless journey. And to me, it's like, well, how are you leaving it better by making things? And like, I look at it, can we make it better than the person that's right next to us? Because that's what progress
Hmm.
is. It's just everybody continuing to level up. And we've really tried to throttle our vintage program. And there's a lot of really cool vintage national park teas out there. So we've use vintage as a means to kind of lighten up the footprint. But I think one of the learnings in getting a business going is to ask for help, and don't be afraid to either. So when
Hmm.
you're at a trade show and you meet somebody from Patagonia, he's like, well, you guys you own this space of sustainability, and Earth is the
Yeah.
shareholder. Well, amazing. Can you help us? Like, and that did involve getting to go up to the campus and talking about sustainability and where do we start. There's
It's
so
really
many
cool.
different angles, and ideally something can be made hyper locally and sold hyper locally. Transportation, was one of the focuses that we've come out of some of these sessions and trying to address, and saying, how do
Mm,
we use less resources and making things and shipping things, and
mm.
really, yeah, the B Corp certification has been great. REI has put a lot of pressure on their their brands to meet certain standards. So there's,
Oh, cool.
everybody's looking for kind of one golden standard. And I think when you tell one niche story, it's not doing it justice. Sustainability also involves the people you're employing. It involves so many different aspects, not just whether it's organic cotton or something like that, right? So yeah, focusing on being a B Corp was a big deal, and getting that certification, and
Yeah.
also, yeah, trying to figure out ways from brands that are bigger and have a lot more resources to get some advice and how to approach,
Yeah.
all of this together, because we're putting a lot of resources into park projects, and yeah, it's hard to be an expert at everything. You definitely learn that pretty quickly. So
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You're making me think of when I interviewed the Grand Teton superintendent. Jackson Hole, one of the neighboring communities, has a sustainable development management plan. And he had said, and he's on the board for that. So he was sharing a little bit about it. And it's not just how is like wildlife restoration in this area and stuff like that. It's also like, how are the public schools? How are people's living experiences here? How is pricing on housing? And so it's really cool when you can do this holistic look. And like you said, the sustainability of your employee workforce and is an important factor in all of that. So that I just thought was a cool tidbit and connection.
Hmm.
With I know you've done a lot of cool partnerships and my like part of my desire to start Who Runs This Park was, I mean, similar to what you said with even working with Patagonia. It's like Who Runs This Park has enabled me to work with brands and people that otherwise I wouldn't have gotten to work it with. And I think Parks Project has opened up some really cool partnerships, but I would love to first understand how you initially partnered with the National Park Service and then go into like brands that you've partnered with also.
Yeah. I think the overall approach is parks are for everyone. So if you're representing and come up with cool branding ideas, graphics and things like that, you got to let everyone in. It's not something that's
Yeah,
just for us. So the whole, you know, business strategy and approach is very collaborative. Um, but yeah, early days, this is like back in 2015, we a story that's not commonly told. We made some pitches to get involved in the Centennial campaign. They were looking for
okay.
vendors. They were looking for business partners that could help execute on the Centennial Find Your Park campaign. Um,
Oh, cool.
and then that kind of coincided with the early developments of the Parks Project brand. We're like, okay, how can we help parks even more? How could we be also a business entity that can further, the National Park Foundation's initiatives? And what that ended up leading to is Parks Project ran the e-commerce for the Find Your Park campaign and was a partner for the Centennial.
Really?
Yeah, for the Centennial was back in
Oh, that's
2016.
so
And it
cool.
was a really big initiative. And I've actually seen some people wearing the products, 9 years later, the Find Your Park campaign. We were probably printing, I might have even been packing, sweating in a facility in LA here. But that led to, a great relationship with national parks. And the Centennial is really
Great.
fun. It's one of those moments that you don't necessarily like as a business because it's a spike, and it's all around like August of 2016 was this like point where they were really ramping up the
Yeah.
support of 100 years of National Park Service, et cetera. But working with the National Park Foundation, amazing. And we were able to bring some cool design sensibilities to that campaign and support
Yeah,
that
that's cool.
whole function that they weren't good at. We were pretty good at those things. So that's what a partnership is usually. You're good at something, someone else is good at something else. They're complementary. Let's do it together. What that's led to, is obviously a close relationship with parks, but a lot of other people want to get into that. And they're thinking, wow, you guys do
Yeah.
design well, you have an impact and a mission. So other brands will come to us and say, hey, we want to get involved in this. And we're creating a lot of goodwill for the world. And we're happy to share it with other
Yeah.
brands. If it's, the footwear collaborations with New Balance or Merrell or Vans, those have been phenomenal. And the music collaborations that we've done, I have a lot of fun with those. The Red Hot Chili Peppers, most
Yeah, of
recently,
course. Oh my gosh.
Grateful Dead, or some other bands that we've worked with in the past. So this music, footwear, or Igloo was a great partnership where we partnered on their eco cool, sustainable, recycled plastic coolers. Put some branding
Yeah.
on those and told a park conservation story there. So many more to come too.
Yeah,
Mm.
what's the idea with the collaborations? Is it that brand that you're working with wanting to tell an impact-based story and saying, "Hey, Parks Project does this really well, so I want and I need them to be a part of this to more effectively tell this story."
Yeah, and we expect you to make a contribution too. Like you got to,
Yeah.
back this. Hopefully, it's a project. Let's get together and,
Yeah.
most recently, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the band members spent time in Yosemite as teenagers, and that meant a
Oh,
lot to
cool.
them. And there's an organization called Nature Bridge, which is bringing youth to Yosemite nature programs. So I said, okay, let's collaborate, highlight Yosemite, put it into the graphic, and support getting kids in the parks.
Yeah. Well, and how fun. I'm thinking for the Red Hot Chili Peppers to like almost pick a project. I mean, who runs this project? Kind of like we were talking
Exactly.
about at the beginning. It's like how exciting to get to design something and create a story around something that already means so much to you. And so it's probably fun to do the collaborations with bands when it's maybe a specific park or maybe more broad collaborations with I think Meryl was that what was the story behind Meryl's
It
collaboration?
was National Trails Day. It's people use
Oh,
Merrill
cool.
to get out on a trail, and we're able to do a volunteer day here in our backyard and put some funding into more volunteer events to maintain trails, right? So I think
That's cool.
you always kind of dig a layer deeper and say, why are we going to do this? It's like there's a lot of things out in the world. We need to make more things. Probably not. Hopefully, we can figure out why these two brands or these two entities are going to put some effort and resources into something. And then that makes it
Right.
a lot more authentic when you share it with the world too.
Yeah. Can you share? I know you pretty early on collaborated with both REI and National Geographic. Can you share about those initial partnerships and if it was kind of a similar model to some of the ones you've done more recently?
Yeah, National Geographic collaborated with them for, I think, about 6 years. And the original
Wow.
intention came out of, they had so many archives of old national park moments, I'd say. So
Mhm.
the first collections, we actually triangulated. Now, so you mentioned REI and National Geographic and Parks Project. We came up with a capsule collection that sort of told the archival national park story through the National Geographic brand and
Cool.
imagery. And REI bought into it, and we were able to do a pretty cool collaboration, a little trifecta right there. And it definitely helped exposure,
Yeah.
credibility, and the those two relationships. Yeah, it took a lot of work. You can't just
Mhm.
start something up out of a back house and show up and do business with these big leagues, right?
No.
So it took a couple iterations and a couple, yeah, no, we definitely got that early days. Said, hey, we want to collaborate with Nat Geo. This is a cool brand. This is the idea we have. I'm saying, you guys probably aren't ready, or we're trying, pitch to REI, and we weren't ready, but the idea was ready,
Yeah.
but the execution probably wasn't. And just keeps you got to keep going at it, not don't stop.
Yeah. I mean, that's good advice literally for
Yeah,
me as starting up who runs this park of there's a lot of ideas, a lot of no's, and any partnership or collaboration that I have done or I'm working on takes a lot of work. Like, for example, I'm working on a documentary with telling stories of park rangers in different national parks through backpacking experiences, and I'm working on getting grant funding for it. And it's like people aren't handing out money just because you have a good idea. Like even applying for the grants and preparing all of that takes a lot of work. And it's it's good because it's you want it like to put your best foot forward. But yeah, it definitely is.
yeah.
There's not many like handouts.
No, and when I get a no, to me, it just means right at this moment in time, there's not a fit.
Yeah.
Okay, let me come back to you on that, because there's a different angle, there's a different time, there's a different,
Oh, for sure.
there's a way. If you truly believe in it,
Yeah,
you can find it.
that's me reaching out to REI is I'm like, a no is a no right now. Sounds good.
Yeah,
We'll keep going.
yeah.
So it's good to hear that y'all experienced that
Oh,
also.
for sure. Yeah,
Can you share a little bit more about the two books that you published and kind of what led you down that route?
yeah. So early on, we actually used to make coloring books. Um, yeah,
What? Really?
and it was during that phase
Cool.
when I think people were kind of going inwards and looking for ways to just coloring was an adult.
Calm
It was an
down or
adult
chill.
thing.
Yeah.
It happened. I don't know how many years ago, but it was like adult coloring books were happening. And I was totally feeling it. I'm like, we're going to make national park coloring books. And that was actually really hard. Publishing something and
Really?
getting it print ready, it's a different technique and a different pagination. It's being multiple four. It just, it wasn't as easy as making apparel, which was very fluid for us. But it did
Hmm.
spawn the idea of like, what would Parks Project Publishing look like? We even had a logo lockup at one point in time. It's like we put it at the end of the coloring books, and then we did some comic books too, which were super
Really?
trippy. Yeah, they were about a snow monkey driving through the national parks in a VW van with a bunch of characters. So they were pretty far
Wait,
out.
that's so cute.
And I think you sort of realize like, okay, how do you make something legit and say, yeah, why don't we try to work with the best publisher that who we think is one of the best publishers? It goes back to these partnership
Right.
type opportunities. We're good at content, branding, imagery. Somebody else might be good at the research, copywriting, book printing. They're publishers. That's what they do.
Right.
Is they publish it and they inventory it all, and these are heavy and they get damaged. And they get shipping. It's the book world is
It's a whole
different,
nother ball
right?
game.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that we reached out to Gestalt and have published 2 books in collaboration with them. The first one was really just celebrating the world of parks, diving into all 63
Yeah.
national parks. And then the second book was more of a lifestyle play where, let's tell the story of living spaces and more of like an architectural story about national park architecture and living spaces and the people who've built them. So yeah, one honestly is a little bit more like heavy content reference manual
Yeah.
that also highlights park champions. That's something that we're big on too, is like celebrating as you
Oh,
do,
cool.
telling stories about people who need that awareness and have done amazing things for parks. And then the other book was, it's kind of more like parks and the project, really. That theme is around all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, how do we
Yeah.
tell stories about lifestyle and also bring you into more of the detail and the heavier stuff.
Yeah. Do you, I guess, when you were working with the publisher, was it, did you pitch them these ideas or did you pitch like, hey, we are Parks Project and we want to work with you?
Yeah, we pitched
And then you came
ideas.
up with the ideas.
Yeah,
Okay.
and they said no.
That's cool.
I said, okay, not right now. Some of these things take
Yeah. You're like, okay, great.
years. It's like
I'll mark that as a maybe
I didn't
later.
package this correctly, so I'll be back to you because I have another
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Did you find yourself changing the ideas pretty drastically or was it really more about how you packaged and presented the idea?
Some of it comes down to distribution. So you have to realize it's like we're making
Right.
a product. Where is it going to end up? You're making a product. How is it going to reach a certain amount of ears, right?
Right.
So we were able to work out, some of those business terms and say, hey, you know what? We can buy a bunch of them to sell them to support the publishing of the book. And we have some retail partners that are really excited about this brand too. So yeah, it's have to keep coming at it with how to make it better and a better
Yeah.
partnership. So everyone gets a win-win.
Yeah. It sounds like in that scenario, and this is also probably just the case when you're pitching with a lot of companies, but you're trying to communicate how you are decreasing the risk of them investing or in and working with you. And so it sounds like by laying out more of the distribution pipelines, that kind of reduces some of the risk because there's like a hey, if we produce this, we have already agreed partners where these books could go and deals that are going to be made and people that are excited about it. So it's like less of a risk, quote unquote, to work with us and take on this idea.
And we were able to resource a lot of the information that they weren't
Yeah.
necessarily experts in this space. So yeah,
Yeah.
worked out.
That's cool. You shared in an interview that before that brands you look up to and want to emulate change over time. Who is it today for Parks Project that you're looking up to and trying to emulate?
Hmm. I maybe Ben and Jerry's. I think what they're doing is really
Oh, I
relevant.
love Ben and Jerry's.
Great brand.
I don't know what are they doing? I don't know if they're doing
They have a new flavor. They always have a new
something different or
flavor.
new.
Yeah, they've got a new
Oh yeah,
flavor
yeah.
that speaks to what's going on in our political landscape, and they make it fun. right? Yeah, I think God, there's a lot of brands, and I may just like rifle off such a weird mix concoction, but I think that's where my
Yeah.
head's at usually from like I love.
Well, and it's fun to see where your brain, as the CEO of Parks Project, you are an apparel company, but where are you looking up to? And it's, an ice cream company and apparel company are not necessarily two companies that you think are similar, but it's like when you're talking about brand, it opens up so many more things you can be inspired by. So I say rife or list them
Yeah.
off.
I mean, it would go from, even like Trader Joe's providing like
Mm,
quality, fun environment, value, great products. It's an amazing brand. Seventh generation, I think, is just um, business can be a force for good, right? That's part of their
yeah,
premise. Um, on cleaning products, I must be cleaning a lot recently because I was also thinking about Dr. Bronner's and just their missions to improve the lives and dignity of all people. What a
yeah,
great, what a great brand. Then there's, I mean, obviously, I think all the nonprofits that we get to partner with have amazing brands that just need to be further developed and delivered. The biggest brand of them all is probably the Nature Conservancy. It's very polished and they have a strong
right.
promise and are doing amazing work. But there are a lot of great brands from the Conservation Corps to your local park nonprofit partner. I think you
Right.
mentioned Yellowstone earlier in Zion and Yosemite. It's those are great brands in my mind, and I really
Yeah.
look up to them and how they're evolving and growing and learning more about how to engage people as a park nonprofit partner. Then I may throw like a curveball, like I don't know, Taco Bell. How they just do mashup. I don't eat it, but I think it's really cool. Everything they're doing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's creative.
It is. It is. They say.
I like I like what you said about the, like, offering quality products in a fun environment, and I think the Ben& and Jerry's and the Trader Joe's are sticking with me of, like, I haven't thought about those through that lens of Ben& and Jerry's does create such fun and topical ice cream flavors, and then Trader Joe's, I mean, everyone's so friendly who works there, like, it's like the brand emulates through all the employees and the products and the design, and I used to live in New York City, and it was, like, the only place that was reasonable to shop at from a grocery
Yeah,
perspective, and it's like the fact that they keep their prices consistent in New York City versus Austin, where I am now. I mean, for someone living in New York, that was amazing. Like, everyone shopped at Trader Joe's.
and you can say hi to people as you shop too. It brings like-minded people. It
Yeah.
creates an experience, and that experience reinforces that brand for me. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
that's kind of way I would look at brands, sort of a promise to a customer and how it's delivered. So, I mean, I think, farmers markets are brands in themselves. How are you going to
Yeah.
do, commerce? I think is a beautiful way to support makers. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's cool to hear from someone who I think yourself, who has created such a strong brand and story-driven company like Parks Project, and it's fun to see where you get inspiration from. A couple fun
Hmm.
questions. Do you have a favorite, you spend a lot of time outdoors, whether that's just like for personal stuff, whether it's for volunteer work through Parks Project or just personal volunteer work. Do you have a favorite snack you like to take with you?
Hmm. It's real food, probably. I don't know. Somewhere
Mm,
along the way, I learned that it's like you just bring real food. You don't need like specialty packaged processed things. I'm a big fan of a wrap or a sandwich. Just like
okay,
it never hurts. You can eat a sandwich for breakfast. Hopefully
true.
it stays, but yeah, I think it just real food. That's what I love. If it's just like sweet snacks, it's going to be dried mangoes for sure. Um,
Oh, yeah.
God, so good. A little vitamin C boost too. Almonds, almond butter for sure. And yeah, I love snacks.
Yeah,
I
those
love beverages too.
Those are I like the idea of just, like, real food, like a simple, like, you don't need anything fancy, just literally bring an apple, Like, don't make it complicated. My go-to is peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in my sandwich realm, especially for hiking just because, it keeps and then it gets mushy
They
and
hold. Yeah.
you can't really complain
Do
about
you
it.
go double decker? Okay.
No.
Sometimes I feel like that
What,
that
put,
holds even more.
like, a piece of bread
So you're talking about
bread in the
three
middle?
pieces of bread. peanut butter and the jelly in between it.
No, I've never done
Maybe give
that.
it a try.
But that could be pretty sensational. That might change the
That
game
might
a
be the
little
one
bit.
thing you remember from this whole session. So
Yeah, right.
thanks.
Right. Be like, yeah, when I was talking to the Parks Project CEO, I got this really good idea to just do a double decker sandwich. Easy peasy. What projects, as we kind of near our time, I'd love to learn a little bit more of some of the projects that are top of mind or that are in your queue for Parks Project going forward.
I think what I'm really trying to do is make these projects relatable and accessible to our customers who seem to
Right.
really want to get on board and take action with habitat restoration. So I think there's a complex means to this, like, and then there's also a simplified version. I'm always just when companies reach out, I'm always trying to say, hey, let me send all your staff cleanup kits, right? And let everyone be looking for some team building things to do. It may be hard to get everyone together, but hey, so you have some people remote, some people here, just send everyone a cleanup kit and then everyone can do their volunteer day together, but in their own place. Um, so
Yeah.
it's really trying to simplify the friction that it takes to leave a place better, and saying it
Hmm.
doesn't have to be far off and, going up to the Catskills, or I'm going to be working on a nursery project in Glacier, which I'm really excited about. But,
What plants are a part of the nursery?
oh, I don't know yet. There,
Okay.
it's always equal part removing some non-natives and helping natives, maintain their stronghold on that local ecosystem, right? So
Cool. Cool.
TBD, I'll get back to you on that one. But yeah, you know, make it accessible, make it something that's easy to do, and we can all be a part of leaving the place better than we found it.
A final question. We were talking about the Red Hot Chili Peppers and how Yosemite was a place they went to a lot as a kid. And that park holds a special spot in their heart. Is there a specific national park that seems to really hold a special spot in your heart? Or is it kind of as you've been to so many and experienced so many, it's a heart that keeps on giving?
Hmm. I think some of it ties back to uh, you can have some really spiritual moments in parks when you
Hmm.
in the right time, right place, right people, right. Like it can be absolutely stunning,
Yeah.
and that does go back to we've done a number of projects in Zion. We took our staff trip there a couple of years ago.
Cool.
We filmed a musician in the park as one of the projects, and trying to say, hey, can we bring musicians to parks to have them connect with those places and do one of a kind acts in the slot canyons and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
but I did a early morning headlamp in the dark hike up to Angel's Landing a few years
Wow.
ago, and was up there by myself to see the sunrise. And that was like that's a moment right there that I'll
Yeah.
forever have with me, and that just makes the park even more special when you have those types of moments. And I also
Yeah.
mentioned climbing the Black Canyon because I had some moments where I was like feeling life so much because I was in so much fear,
Yeah.
and that also sticks with you too. But
For sure.
um, yeah, it's there, that's always the number one question I get. What's your favorite park? What should I go do? I'm like, hey, there's no cheat code for this. Like, it's part of the adventure of the whole world of parklands and national parks is that you get to find your adventure.
Yeah.
And what's right for me might not be right for you,
Yeah.
because I might be back up in Tuolumne in Yosemite, which is one of my favorite places, and you might be more comfortable in the valley, walking to the lower falls or something like that. So
Yeah.
um, I don't even know if I answered your question, if I just rambled about it, but that's
No.
something that I can talk about just forever because I think parks can really inspire us to explore more in life and explore ourselves and our
Yeah.
potential.
Yeah.
And so thankful that we can be a part of that world and encourage more
Yeah.
people to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think your brand and company does a great job doing that. So, yeah, thanks again for your time and for sharing a little bit more about your story and about Parks Project. It's been fun hearing about it.
Oh, for sure. It was awesome. I'll see you out in the parks.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, thanks for listening today. If you like this podcast, please share the word. Who Runs This Park's success relies on you rating, reviewing, and sharing the word about the podcast with your friends. If you have an idea for someone you want me to interview for this new segment, send me an email at maddie@whorunsThispark.com or DM me on Instagram at whorunsThispark, and we'll make it happen. Thanks again. So thankful for listeners like you. See you next week.